Welcome. Thank you for joining the Falling in Love with Writing intro webinar. We are so glad that you have joined us today. This webinar is part of a learning series to help parents to understand what they need to do to get their middle school child on track for learning and to stay on track for success. So, to let you know a little bit about me, I am TD Flinaw. I am a national board certified teacher, and I have over 2 decades of experience as an educator. I know that education is very important for students to embrace and to find their joy in it because in my own personal experience as a student, it gave me hope and it helped me to really transform my life. It created, and I also have experience creating teacher education courses and workshops nationwide. So our business is Ride Tie Education Solutions. Again, our focus is on parents and discovering that genius in their child. We know that parents are the first teachers, as well as the close family and friends, and they're also the continuous teachers. And really, a lot of the teaching that and the training that teachers get, I want to bring that to the forefront for parents because that is the secret sauce to make sure that our education is more holistic and it reaches every learner. So, working with educators and parents together is that secret ingredient that we need to make sure that learning is productive and restorative and fulfilling. So in this quick webinar, brief webinar, we're going to talk about how you might be turning your child off from learning, how you need to turn them on, how you can integrate learning into your family life, thinking of an action plan, how we get them on track, and then how do you stay connected throughout their educational journey. So I really feel like this is an area that we don't know that we're doing, parents. So really take time to reflect. Have you done any of these? Have you commented about a task that you needed to do? And we're saying that's too much writing. Why do I have to read all of that? All of those kind of comments. You told your child you're writing is sloppy. I can't even read it. It doesn't make any sense. And you turned writing into a punishment. The old school way, of course, is when they have kids write standards, meaning that kids needed to write the same sentence 50 times, 100 times. So that's what they call standards. It's really an old school way. Even my school district now characterizes it as corporal punishment. So you really can get dismissed for giving standards now. So it's really frowned upon. But of course, nothing stops a parent from doing that. But the other side of that coin is that kids really hate writing and they get an idea like this is writing. And it's something that you can use as punishment because, it's not something that's enjoyable. So we really need to flip that script. So these types of comments set up an environment where kids are turned off from learning and they're getting the message that learning's not fun and it's something that you do when you're in trouble. So we want to think about how we can do the opposite, really turn kids on to writing. And so as you're talking about writing that you have to do, you want to frame the tasks in a positive light. I get to write, I get to show them, I get to display my genius, my strategies, my thought processes. So it's looked as an opportunity. Um, when you are giving kids feedback on their writing, you want to make sure that you give them specific positive feedback. I'm saying positive first because that's what you need to start with first. Start with compliments. Looks like you worked really hard on this. why don't you read your writing to me? So that's something that we can say instead of saying, your writing is really sloppy. I don't even know what this says. It don't make no sense. So instead of giving them that feedback, you are giving them an opportunity to read their work and say, oh, I would love for you to read it to me. So you have to think how you can say positives to what your child is doing, because we have seen where kids are very excited to share something they wrote for you. And of course, it doesn't make sense. Of course, it's not spelled correctly. It's okay. They did it by themselves for you, to give to you, to share with you. So you got to make sure you're giving them those positives. Then they would like to give you more, and they enjoy giving it, and they'll think, oh, I could give something to my grandma too. I gave it to my mom. My mom really loved it. And it puts them on the path of an environment in which they learn to write. They love to write. They learn to write because they love to write. So we want to think about how we can integrate writing into our daily lives. I do want to keep saying that writing is a neglected skill across the United States as far as teacher education programs are concerned, as well as professional development, ongoing professional development for teachers. It is something that is a unsupported or inadequately supported skill. And so you need to think about, as a parent, how to combat that. And that is by integrating writing into your daily life, making sure that you're integrating writing, that writing is happening on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to look like school writing, meaning you're going to write this essay on this topic. But you want to think about little ways, grocery list, lunchbox notes, or maybe it's a backpack note. Maybe they're not taking lunch. Writing journals, you could write to them, they could write to you, and using words as gifts, right? And kids naturally do that. They'll find something, they want to draw a picture of you, they want to label that picture, they want to, tell you what's going on, and really nurture that. And as they get older, they'll continue to do that if you nurture that with them. So setting it up as a learning environment at home, but again, not traditional. And you want to be clear about finding ways to use writing in the wild. So in the wild, is what I'm saying, is just naturally occurring in the world, right? We'll see the newspapers, we'll see magazines, we'll see podcasts, blogs. So think about normal ways to use writing, and don't try to mimic how they do it in school. Of course, if there's a school assignment, of course, help with the school assignment. But when we're thinking about integrating it throughout our daily life, think about ways that you can borrow from the natural world and where the writing is used. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Okay. One, it pays very, very well.
Okay.
Tech in general as an industry is very rewarding if you are fortunate to work for a company that has some level of success. So that's a very important caveat, because there's a lot of tech startups and a lot of, I've also done that as well. Number two, as we all know, tech is more and more ingrained in our daily lives. So there's no way around
Absolutely.
technology.
Hi, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. I am TD Blenna. We have this podcast to help parents and caregivers with having the resources, strategies, and tools needed to make sure that their children are on track for learning and to stay on track for success. Today, we have Micah Jackson. He's going to talk to you about his career in tech and his educational path up to this point. Thank you so much for joining us, Micah.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Um, so one thing that we want the audience to consider is like, what is your current job title and your responsibilities?
Sure. So I'll tell you my title first, and then I'll explain it because it's a long title.
Okay.
So I work for Snap, and basically Snapchat, the app that many people know. I'm sure a lot of maybe your listeners and their kids use Snapchat. And my title is Senior Manager for Platform Partnerships, and I oversee content strategy and innovation. And what
Okay.
that all means, I should have said AR content, which AR stands for augmented reality.
Okay.
And basically, what my job is to a lot of the augmented reality technology that's used on Snapchat for like the filters and things like that.
Okay.
Well, my job is to take that AR technology and figure out ways to apply it outside of Snapchat. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So, with, how did you get here to this current career path? So, we want to ask you, like, who or what hooked you into learning as a child?
That's a great question. So I actually have two. I have a who and a what. I don't know if this happened before on your show. I'll start with the what. The what that really made me kind of pay attention as a student was I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. So I wanted to fly on the space shuttle and go to space and all that stuff. And somebody, I don't know if it was a teacher or my mom, but somebody told me like, hey, if you want to be an astronaut, you really need to study math and science, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so from that point, it kind of clicked for me, and I really began to like pay attention, for like science and things like that. And I really liked science. Like science was probably my favorite subject as a kid. Um,
Okay.
in terms of the who, I've been really fortunate to have a lot of really great teachers. But there was one teacher that stood out in particular. His name was Mr. Cosby. He was my fifth grade teacher. And if you're thinking he
Sounds
was,
familiar.
yeah, exactly. He was related to Bill Cosby. He was his younger brother.
Okay.
Um, but Mr. Cosby was he truly made learning fun. He was a really unique teacher in that just his style and the way that he taught lessons, it was almost like watching a storyteller, and it was just one of those, he's just one of those great teachers, that really just made learning interesting for me, as a
Okay.
kid. So
Cool. And so you have your who, you have your what, and then what was your education path that led you to your current career?
yeah, so aside from being an astronaut, the thing that I always enjoyed doing as a kid was drawing. Like I loved art. My first grade teacher gave me a certificate for art. That was like the first award that I got.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I went to a private grade school for first to sixth grade here in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, it no longer exists, but it was called International Children's School,
Okay.
or ICS for short. And it was unique in that it was largely taught by African American staff, run by African American staff. Most of the students were Black or Hispanic, but a lot of like celebrities at that time, or even today, attended there as well.
Okay. Who were some of your classmates?
Yeah. So back in the day, there was a show called Different Strokes, and
Okay. Yes.
the one of the main characters, his name was Emmanuel, or not Emmanuel Lewis. Now I forget. I'm
Gary
blanking.
Coleman.
Gary Coleman. Thank you. He attended there, and Alfonso Ribeiro, who used to be on Fresh Prince of Bel Air, he's still on TV.
Yes,
He
yes.
attended there, and then Tyra Banks, before she was like who she is today.
Supermodel. Yeah.
Yeah, she was there, and then Kenya Barris, who's like a writer, producer. But a lot of and then there were some other like actors and then
Hmm.
also the children of like some actors and producers and things like that
Right.
were also attended. So it was a great school. It really prepared me, I think, for the career that I have in terms of just the foundational learning.
Yes.
And then junior high school, I went to Audubon here in Los Angeles, and basically it was my first public school experience, and it
Hmm.
really taught me how to adapt to a different environment.
Hmm.
Go to school with kids who were from all different backgrounds. And then from there I went to Hamilton Music Academy here in Los Angeles. And I forgot to mention that. So at Audubon, I got interested, still not so much in art and drawing, but I got interested in drama.
Okay.
Still different creative outlet, but that led me into Hamilton Music Academy because you back then you had to basically audition to go to Hamilton.
Okay.
So even though it's a public school, it was still sort of closed. But I didn't play an instrument. I actually was a performer. So I
Oh.
did drama at Hamilton and was part of their play production. And I was in a bunch of plays, and that was sort of what I did at
Nice.
Hamilton. Yeah.
Nice. And I did do a deep dive, and we do have a video of you at
Oh my
Hamilton, so we will
goodness.
include it so you can see.
Oh my
Yeah, because you
goodness.
were one of the first classes in that music academy. And so that's when you were,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to say it was like Dateline, but yeah, we'll put it on so you can
Oh goodness, I don't know what you're gonna see, but yeah, it should be interesting. But it was good times at Hamilton. I really enjoyed, and too, like even aside from drama, like Hamilton at that time, I give it credit for being one of the most integrated schools, like in LAUSD.
Okay.
So it did, if anything prepared me for my career, I have to say it was being at Hamilton and being like a student among kids from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, socioeconomical backgrounds. Like it really
Mm-hmm.
prepared me to be comfortable, no matter where someone came from. So from Hamilton, I wanted to go to UCLA, but the major that I applied to at UCLA, which is the design major,
Okay.
well, that school closed my senior year, so they weren't accepting any new applicants for that particular major. And so basically, long story short, they sent me this letter saying, hey, you can either choose a different major or apply as like undeclared. And
Mm-hmm.
so I can't remember. I think I did apply for. I think I applied to be a theater major or something like that, but I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
accepted to that
Okay.
particular major. So I basically was like, either I can try to go to a different school, or my mom was like, you should just go to West LA, go to the community college, and then transfer. And it wouldn't have been my first choice, but I have to
Mm-hmm.
say it ultimately was the best choice because the first 2 years at West LA, the thing I realized was that I wasn't really ready for UCLA. Like if I had gone to UCLA right out of high school, I
Mm.
could have potentially had to drop out because I was
Wow.
not prepared. But the other thing too is it saved a ton of money, because I was able to knock out my first 2 years and, have no debt going into UCLA. And so, I tell people like if money is a barrier to going to college, definitely go to community college because it's a way of not only saving money but also understanding like where you really are, in terms of your preparation and being able to, you know really hack it when you get to, especially at school. UCLA is no joke. It is.
Yeah.
And even back then it was hard. It was very hard even when I transferred. But had I not had that discipline at West LA, I don't know if I would have made it.
I just want to pause with there because a lot of kids, they'll get really hung up on that setback, not getting into the school of their choice or not being able to do that. And, you took the time to, not that you wanted to, but you went to the community college and then you can reflect on how much you gained from that experience. So it's something that we may need to consider for kids. It's not
Absolutely.
the end of the world, and take some time and then get into the program eventually that you wanted to get into. So it's a good
Yeah.
lesson.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I think too, it's like it, it can be, yeah, I know, I understand that when a lot of students don't get their sort of a school or the school that they really want to go to, like, I'm a big believer in that, everything kind of happens for a reason, right? And like
Yes.
you in many cases, this is also relevant to UCLA, and going back to the design major, because what ended up happening, so I went to West LA for a couple of years and wanted to transfer, once I had all my classes and coursework ready. Well, UCLA, the design program still wasn't open.
Right.
So when I applied to UCLA, I had to apply as an art history major, which thankfully I was accepted and I got into UCLA as an art
Right.
history major. But it wasn't until that first, like basically the first quarter at UCLA, that they were finally starting to accept applications for design. And so, long story short, I applied to the design program, and thankfully I got admitted. And I'm literally of the first class to graduate from UCLA's new revamped design program. And
Wow.
so the timing all worked out, thankfully. And had I, if I had chosen to go to a different college or something, like if I had gone to a Cal State or like just another school, um, I probably wouldn't have transferred. I probably would have just stayed and gotten a degree, but I wouldn't have gotten, the degree that I wanted initially,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you have to, life is funny like that. You have to sometimes just kind of roll with, however the path leads
Yeah.
you, basically.
So as you're talking about, your art and then your drama, like what are some of the activities and courses that you took
Mhm.
that really helped you, propel you to success that you have today?
Sure. So I would say along the way, I'll kind of go through each phase of schooling. So in grade school, it was sort of the nurturing of the art, and I think too, like I said, studying science and math, and really
Hmm.
kind of paying more attention to those subjects. Um, and I would say too, the thing I credit with my this is a big one, really relevant, for grade school. We had it was, again, it was a private school, so that
Hmm.
was kind of the exception. But I had a computer class in second grade, and
Oh,
this was in
okay.
1982. So that was
Mm.
almost unheard of.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was unheard of, in any kind of public school or anything like that. That and I had my own first computer at home when I was 9 years old. And so that played a key factor directly into what I'm doing today.
Right.
So I would say that's the first thing, is that one, just the exposure to a computer and understanding like how it worked, and like that you needed to, and back then you had to you literally had to use a language called BASIC in order to do anything in a computer.
Yes.
So you had to code, right? So it was like, there was no way around it. There was
It's
no
that
other.
black screen, right?
It's just yeah, I was like, back then I would hook it up to my TV. Like that's how, yeah, I had a Commodore, and then at school we had an Apple two, we had an Apple One, I think, or one or two C. So it had like the old green screen and the old green text and all of that stuff. But yeah, you had to write code in order to do anything. And so that was the first step. Junior high school, I think the drama was something. I was always a very shy kid, and even in grade school. And so
Hmm.
the drama was an outlet to help me be able to express myself and not, feel more open and being able to
Okay.
talk to people. That's the second most critical skill that is needed for my current role, like, and it's the one I use the most, quite frankly. And then
Yeah.
that just continued to develop at Hamilton when I in play production. And then I'd say at Hamilton, the thing that outside of I give credit to, I had a really great English teacher named Mr. Lee. And like he also was a person that really instilled in me not just English in terms of grammatical, being able to be astute as a good writer, but I think the thing that he taught me was like critical thinking and being able to really think about, there was no taboo subject like with him. Like in fact, he was the one that started me on journaling, right? And being able to write down ideas and things like that. So those are kind of the key pillars, I think, in my education, that before I get to college, that really helped me. And then
Yeah.
college, design, I wanted to be an architect. By the time I got to college, my
Right.
career shifted to architecture. Design was really sort of like the feeder underground, not undergrad
Yes.
degree that led into architecture. In fact, the school was the School of the Arts and Architecture at UCLA, and
Okay.
design was a major within that school, basically. Um, and so that's why I wanted to be in that major. But what happened during that time is there was the rise of like computer generated animation, and so like Pixar and Disney now
Yes.
uses
Yes.
CG animation. Long story short, what happened in college was I got more fascinated with that and like computer animation than architecture. And I actually had to take architecture classes as part of my coursework. And I
Okay.
found it to be a little boring, if I'm honest. It was just, it was like, I don't know if I want to do this actually, like, long term. It was still interesting, and I still love architecture actually, but the computer animated side and basically using computer graphics to either represent the real world or
Mm-hmm.
like people in the case of
Join us for Well Educated Wednesdays every Wednesday on Instagram Live at Falling for Learning. It is a free parent question and answer session where parents can ask questions, learn about resources, strategies, and tips to make sure their children are on track for learning and stay on track for success. That's every Wednesday on Instagram Live at Falling for Learning. We look forward to seeing you and helping the next generation thrive.
Pixar animation. That was the thing that fascinated me. That was the thing that I would work on, until 2 a.m. because I just love creating things in a computer and like bringing them to life in a computer. And so, like, that was really the thing that got me to where I am at the moment.
Wonderful. And that's, we're called Falling for Learning. And it sounds like you're falling in love with what you were doing, when you can stay up all the time and, you just want to keep pursuing it. Um, so so tell us why this type of career is something worth pursuing. So if people are thinking about it or they're not sure, like why is it worth pursuing?
I'm going to I'll give you the concise points and then I'll expound a little bit.
Okay.
One, it pays very, very well.
Okay.
um, Tech in general as an industry is very rewarding if you are fortunate to work for a company that has some level of success. So that's a very important caveat because there's a lot of tech startups and a lot of,
Hmm.
I've also done that as well. Number two, um, as we all know, tech is more and more ingrained in our daily lives. So there's no way
Yes,
around
absolutely.
technology, basically. Like we're using technology right now,
Yes.
right? And so basically, if you want a job function in the future economy, there's no way that tech is not going to intersect with it.
Hmm.
Basically, there's no way
Yeah.
around it. So those are the two main pillars, right? For anyone thinking about a career in tech. And then
So,
I'll go
oh,
ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
So can you give us like a salary range, maybe?
So the ranges they will vary. I will say for established tech companies or startups that are
Hmm.
doing relatively well, six-figure salaries are the minimum. And
Okay.
I would say, like, 100K is like entry level,
Okay.
basically, in that industry. And then I would say, obviously at the top end, you're looking at, there are people that make millions of dollars, obviously in tech. Like there's,
Right.
without, people in executive level, C-suite and that kind of thing. But I would say that the thing that many people don't realize is that people who are working in middle management, and they're engineers that make $500,000, like in this industry, and it's not uncommon.
Okay.
Like that's not a uncommon thing. I would say multiple six figures is probably an average for a successful, or
Okay.
relatively successful tech company.
So one thing I want to go back to, because in your education, you told us UCLA, you told us undergrad. Did you do graduate school?
I did not. And in fact, I wanted to. My plan was to go, like I mentioned, I wanted to go to architecture, which would have been the graduate program for my major. But what happened is I ended up working out of college. So I worked at an
Okay.
ad agency initially, and then doing design. So I graduated in design, and I did like graphic design. That was also, I graduated in the late 90s. So this was also during the time of what was called the dot-com boom. So it was
Mm-hmm.
right, it was the
Okay.
emergence of like Google and Yahoo and AOL, and this was even before MySpace, but like ultimately led to like, or not, or like Facebook and like all
Right.
of these things. So like when I graduated, there was a lot of opportunity to work in the dot com, you know, basically
Mm-hmm.
in the tech industry, but
Right.
back then the focus wasn't mobile, it was all web, it was all online. So I got a job, and I worked for an ad agency first, worked for a digital, like it was a precursor to iTunes,
Okay.
basically. Um, and then later, I have a crazy career.
Okay.
um, Worked for AOL, which would back then was like the Google of its time. Worked for
Right.
a video game company, Atari, which was like the original like game
Yes.
company. But this
We,
was after all of that, and
yes.
then worked for Yahoo, worked for Disney. There's an arcade cabinet from the Wreck-It Ralph movie behind me.
Yes. Let's talk
uh,
about that later. Your
yeah.
arcade. Yeah. Your
Uh, I did get to work for NASA doing web production, worked for JPL in Pasadena, and then
hmm.
ultimately did my own startup, my own company, and then worked where I currently am at Snap. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, I mean the career path is, all the stuff that I learned has taken me through this, incredible career path.
Yeah. All right. So that's something we need to note. Like, in this case, you don't like, is it the same now that you don't need to go to graduate school? Because I know that some careers you have to go to graduate school. You have to do your undergrad, you have to do this, but is that the same now?
So again, it depends on your area of focus.
Okay.
So in the case of tech, like you do not need a graduate degree to be an engineer.
Okay.
However, comma,
Okay.
um, it depends on, so, and this, it can get very complicated, but in the case of emerging areas like AI or artificial intelligence, for example, there are people who are leading a lot of the key sort of industries in that space. More than likely they do have a graduate degree, and most likely from Stanford or MIT or something like that,
Okay.
because The reason is not about the name of the college. It's because those schools have funding from institutions
Okay.
and VCs and investors who want to cultivate that particular industry. And so they donate a lot of money to those programs. And thus you have majors that are sort of funded almost, for that specific research. And so those are the
So that
exceptions.
so that also means that you don't really need to spend the money. Like you don't have to like go into debt to do that program. Is that what that means?
Mm, you still have to pay to be a student at
Okay.
Stanford, right?
Okay.
But it means that more than often what happens, and Stanford is basically well known as like the Silicon Valley school, right? Like
Okay.
it's because they have this relationship with a lot of the venture capital firms and investors and to companies like Google and Yahoo and Microsoft, et cetera, where those companies will set aside funding for students who may be wanting to do research in the field of AI, right? So the student is still paying to
Okay.
go to that. They still are paying for their master's degree. And maybe, I
Okay.
don't know the details. Some of them might be getting grants so that it's offset or whatever. But really the money is used to purchase, like for example, to study AI, you need racks and racks of computer servers, right?
Okay.
Those cost millions of dollars, right? And so the school doesn't have that kind of money necessarily, but a Google will come in and say, hey, well, we'll fund, we'll put $2 million in a fund or whatever for this research. Now I know I'm going off topic, but yeah, so
No, this is great
yeah,
information. Like we need to know about like where's the best schools to go to, or places that
yeah.
fund it.
But
And
to answer
when
your question, you do not need a graduate
okay.
degree to be in tech. The answer
Okay.
is no, it's not required. But if you do want to study something like a very specific field, there's a good chance it will help you, because then you can thus
Okay.
have access to all of these things. So
And like what are some of the other hiring trends that are going on in tech right now that people should know about?
So the first thing I would say in general, kind of going back to you not needing a graduate degree or a postgraduate degree, um, excuse me, is that, and specifically too, I try to get this out to people of color who may not consider a career in tech because they're like, oh, I'm not a coder, right? Or I'm not
Right.
someone who knows how to program, a site or whatever. Tech utilizes all sorts of disciplines, whether it's art, whether it is project management, whether it's human resources, whether it's, even catering. I'm grateful at Snap. We have our own cafe and cafeteria,
Nice.
right? So there's a range of jobs and disciplines that are needed. In fact, like behavioral discipline is also needed, like being a counselor, being able to understand the dynamics of teams, like people who
Mm,
study that sort of discipline. And like, so the thing I would just say is like in the tech sector, there's so many opportunities that a lot of people don't even realize are there,
hmm.
because I think there's this misconception that, oh, I need to have a CS or a computer science degree in order to, work for Google or
Right.
Microsoft or whatever. You don't. You actually they take people of all sorts of disciplines. And so to answer your question about hiring, it's been, obviously in the last few years, there's been a real shift about DEI and hiring a diverse
Right.
workforce. Well, that's not just a buzzword, and it doesn't just mean hiring people of color or people of, a specific background or, sexual orientation or any of that. What
Hmm.
what tech realize the industry realizes is that hiring people of all sorts of disciplines also is really beneficial because you get insights and experience from people who, maybe their degree is in education, right? And they've learned how to write curriculums and how to
Yes.
structure things in a way that is applicable for training in our company, right? Like we
Right.
all still have, like every year I have to do the training for, like all of the legal and the privacy and all that
Yes.
stuff. Well, it takes people who understand how to write a curriculum to do that, you know? Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So, and two, like there's actually one of my coworkers, we, for the tools that we use to create, augmented reality experiences, it's available for free on the web. Anybody can download it. You can be a student and download. It's called Lens Studio. I'm not trying to like plug it, but like if you're interested in AR, you can start like even in grade school. And but again, we hired someone with an education background to make the curriculum because it makes sense, right? She knows how to take
Yes.
information and make it and package it in a way that people can digest, so like yeah, there's all sorts of disciplines that are needed in tech.
Okay. I mean, thank you. That's like really good. What advice do you have for people who want to go in or maybe considering it, the tech career?
I would say kind of the things I was just sharing, like find whatever your passion is, whatever your interest is. And if you are, I would say don't discount a company that, is a tech company or maybe say, so I'll talk specifically about augmented reality, kind of using that example, right? Like augmented reality is basically taking computer graphics and overlaying it on the real world, right? So something like that may seem like, you may seem like, oh, well, I don't know, that seems beyond me or that's not my thing or whatever.
Right.
Um, but the advice I would give you is that look into what the company is that is doing that and see where you fit in, right? And like I was saying earlier, the way that our world is today, and definitely in the next 5-10 years,
Mm-hmm.
tech is going to be tech is will be ingrained in every aspect of
Yes.
any career. There's no way around it, right? So being able to figure out how you fit in now is important, right? What skills can you bring to the table? So
Yeah. Okay. So I think we need to address the big arcade or like the video game. I don't know what to call it in the back of the room. Tell us like more about what it is and all that.
So I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to work for Disney for many years. And I at Disney I worked as a game producer. So
Okay.
I made games for when I was sharing about the dot com. So this was before like iPads and iPhones, like well, not before that, but before kids had their own iPad and
Okay.
iPhones. So back when they were like first coming out, like kids didn't have that. But kids would use the computer and they would play games online.
Mm-hmm.
So I made games for the Disney.com website. And when this film came out, Wreck-It Ralph, my job was to actually think of games like for
Okay.
these movies because they would use those games to promote the movie. And so I
Nice.
got to actually work with the producers and the directors and the writers. Like, so I got to know a lot of the Pixar folks, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
Disney. In fact, the producer and director sent this to me as a gift because they
Oh.
made. So we made 60 of these for the launch of the film, and they needed one for Comic-Con in July in San
Okay.
Diego. And if you haven't seen the movie, the whole movie is like Ralph is a video game character, and like you're going inside the video game.
Mm-hmm.
So this was actually the game that Ralph lived in. So they wanted to make a real one
Yeah.
for Comic Con, and then also for Disneyland and Disney World. So like Disneyland used to have an arcade. So they made 60 of these, and they actually were in Disneyland and El Capitan Theater here in Hollywood and a bunch of other theaters and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then they had this big like marketing campaign where they had like these video game legends. Like these were people who had like all the highest scores, like the Guinness Book of World Records highest score for like Donkey Kong and all these other.
Oh, okay.
So they had this big tournament and they played this actual game and had like the high scores and all this stuff.
Wow.
But yeah, so the producers and the directors sent this to me as a gift because like I was a producer for this
Mm-hmm.
particular game. So
Wow. Such an illustrious career. So many things. That's amazing.
I have a ton of stuff. Yeah, like I have quite the career, and like it have to be a whole other show if I were to tell you about all those experiences.
All
But
right.
yeah.
Well, for the future, yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving this insight. Are there any last things that you want to say to any parents who are trying to get their kids on track for learning and to stay on track for success?
Actually, there's a lot I could share, but I would say if there's one thing I could say, it is if one, invest in a computer. If you don't have one or you don't have, access to
Okay.
one, get your kids access to a computer. Two, when you have access to a computer, learn, do not be afraid of coding. Learn coding, learn. AI is the talk of the town right now. That's going to make things a lot easier in the future. But right now, there are people making a lot of money learning how to basically cultivate AI right now.
Okay.
And I would say if there's any field that, is going to be one of expertise that's needed in the future, it's that. So learn to, don't buy the Jordans, save up, get a computer, get a Chromebook or something, right?
Okay.
Two, learn to code.
All right. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
And we will
having me.
put links in the summary about some of the things that Micah is talking to us about. Thank you again. Have a good week.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks again for supporting the Falling for Learning podcast. New episodes go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. You can watch us on youtube.com at Falling for Learning or listen on all major podcast platforms such as Apple, Google, Audible, Spotify, and much more. For more resources, visit fallinginlovewithlearning.com. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful week. With our human teachers, there could be a variety of things going on where they're not providing the best education for our particular child. Even excellent teachers are not always able to meet all the demands that different children need. We have often overcrowded classrooms, and for whatever reason, the child may not open up to the teacher and really be a source of a place to really trust and build up with the teacher. So it really is imperative that parents really are empowered. They know the skills, they know the direction to go when their child isn't getting what they need. If they're not, they're going to end up being behind. And middle school is a crucial area to really make sure that your child is together because it's right before high school. The training ground for high school is middle school. When I see the facts are the facts, right? This person has been given this amount of workload. I've been given this amount of workload. I don't want to put anyone down. Facts are facts. This is not fair. Please explain why this is happening. And that is, again, asking questions sometimes makes a huge difference because when you find out, when you ask the question, there's not really an answer, that kind of reveals like, oh, okay, there's not really a reason. There should be a very clear reason why it was done. And if they don't have that, it's because most likely, you're being discriminated against. Hello, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. I am TD Flinnaw, a National Board Certified Educator and parent who is on a mission to ensure that parents have the strategies, resources, and skills needed to make sure that they know how to get their kids on track for learning and to stay on track for success. Here I got my tea. Wow. So, today's about self-advocacy. So just going to be 100. There's some things going on. I'm not going to really be in the details with you about it, like, nitty gritty, but just to let you know that self-advocacy, when we're talking about learning, this is where we talk about applying our skills. So self-advocacy could come in many different forms. One of the forms could be that you are just asking questions. As a kid in school, I remember, math class specifically, people weren't asking questions. I was the only one who had questions. And sometimes their silence was really loud for me. Like, why does she have so many questions? So again, but I didn't even care. But I know that it's an issue for a lot of people. We're like, okay, when no one else is asking questions, I'm not going to ask questions. Maybe they'll think it's a dumb question. Maybe that's a problem. And I don't really care about that. I didn't care then because, my perfectionism inside just was like, I got to know the answer. I got to get to it. But this is what you really need. Like, this is the reason that you learn how to read, write, do math, all this, because you can advocate for yourself, right? You could advocate for your community. And one of them is just asking questions, because sometimes when you get asked questions, you find out information that is key in moving you forward. Right. And it also reveals inequities sometimes, inequitable treatment. And sometimes self-advocacy is just asking, not just asking a question, but then also just saying, you know what, this is too much. This is too much for me. And I feel like it is, I'm not able to do it. This is an untenable situation. So sometimes that's the self-advocacy. And you could tell people, and people are like, oh, well, don't think it's a big deal. And then, again, using those writing skills. So you could speak it. Sometimes just asking questions. It's pointing out some things, like speaking up. And then sometimes it is, okay, well, let me write it down, because I have discovered that all these different things are happening that don't quite make any sense. And, obviously I'm a Black woman, and there are trends across the United States, across the country, across the district, across, even where I work, of people being treated unfairly. And I understand now, it's been, it's very rarely where people just say, we don't have Black people work here. We don't like Black people. Like back in the day, people would say, okay, we don't have the N-words. We don't hire them here, right? They don't say that anymore. Right. And a lot of times the people who are in the leadership positions don't even know that the people that that are working for them are discriminating, are creating systems, are using favoritism. They don't know. And so you have to put things in writing and to let people know, like, no, there's a system here. You may specifically not be, as a leader, may not be the person who is causing this to be this way or green lighting it, but you have green lit people that you trust. But then when you look at what they've done, the pattern is there where it is consistently, problematic, because it is targeting people, it's overloading people, it's treating people in a certain way. And then when you see that those people happen to look a certain way, that that's in common, those people are kind of getting run out or pushed out, then you know it's a systematic problem in that particular place. And again, I am very clear that a lot of times the leader doesn't know that. The leader does not know that the people that are in certain positions, right, because they have to delegate, are the ones that are setting a system in place that puts the place that they're in charge of in a negative light. So, and that's really tricky because it's very easy if someone is being rude to you or being disrespectful to you and you're like, wait a minute, very easy for you to speak up, put in a report, file formal grievances and all that. But when you're in the situation where people are kind of nice and friendly, then you have to really think about, am I going to turn on someone's bad side or whatever? But the truth is that self-preservation is number one. Is the situation that I'm in untenable? Am I being treated unfairly? Yes, 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 yes. If that's the case, then you got to speak up for yourself. Right? Because what's happening is people are going to judge you for your performance and what you're doing when you can see that you're overcharged, you're overworked. You cannot keep up with these demands that they've asked you to do. So you have to speak up for yourself. Otherwise, you're being treated as if, oh, you're just not that good at whatever. It's like, no, actually, I've been treated unfairly in this case. And so I'm going to speak up so that you understand, like, no, this situation that you put me in doesn't make any sense, untenable. And then it also feels really bad because you have to look around and look at the people that you are working with and compare them. You got to compare yourself. And so it makes it seem kind of snotty, like, oh, are you comparing yourself to other people? You're being rude to other people? Or no. I'm pretty much, I work with people professionally, but when I see the facts are the facts, right? This person has been given this amount of workload. I've been given this amount of workload. I don't want to put anyone down. Facts are facts. This is not fair. Please explain why this is happening. And that is, again, asking questions sometimes makes a huge difference because when you find out, when you ask the question, there's not really an answer, that kind of reveals like, oh, okay, there's not really a reason. There should be a very clear reason why it was done. And if they don't have that, it's because most likely, you're being discriminated against. And it always, like I said, doesn't feel like, oh, we don't deal with N-words here. It is not so in your face. People could be nice, smile at you, be very courteous and kind. And sometimes it comes in the form of a backhand compliment, meaning you're strong, you're so talented, you're so amazing, and we're going to give you all this work because, yeah, you can handle it. This person over here may not be able to handle it. It's maybe going to be difficult for them. It's maybe going to be hard. So we're going to give it to you because you're so strong and you're so. And I'm more in the case like, oh no. Mm-mm. If you want to give me the poor reputation and just pay me the full time like this other person's getting, let's do it. This part-time bottom shelf work for full-time pay, by all means, right? I don't need this backhanded compliment like you're so good and so amazing and I'm going to give you so much extra work. I don't need that. Who needs that? Please, give me a break. Give me a break. Ooh, honey. Give me a break. So it's very difficult when you find yourself being treated nicely, but at the same time being given a nasty load, given overworked, and you gotta let them know, baby, no ma'am. It's not funny though. I can't say it's funny, but sometimes you laugh because it's like, what you gonna do, cry? And sometimes I would say yes, sometimes cry. Because guess what? Some people are over there crying and they're feeling sympathy for them. And some of us just like have learned, okay, I'm just going to suck it up. No, I'm not. No, ma'am. So I'm just drinking my tea this evening, reflecting on self-care. Self-care is self-advocacy, speaking up for yourself. Again, comes in many forms. You got to write that letter. If you got to just say it verbally, and sometimes asking questions. Sometimes people give you things to do. You don't even know how it's supposed to happen. Ask them, how is this supposed to happen? Because it's not clear to me. Not clear to me how you want this to be done, when this is supposed to be done, how it's supposed to be done. I'd like to know. Because, a lot of times people delegate tasks. They don't know how long it takes. They don't know what it takes. What are the steps that are included in it? And they feel like, but once you come up with those steps and all those things that need to be done, then you have to say, guess what? Look at all these steps that need to be done in order to get this done. Do you know that I have these other tasks that need to be done as well? Where's the priority? And then when you realize, you have to kind of look around and notice other people don't have the same amount of work and don't have the same task, and in some cases have complained and actually gotten a lightened workload. And guess who gets that workload? You getting the workload. Just to be clear, you the one getting the workload. So you got to speak up for yourself. They've spoken up for themselves. And so you got to speak up for yours. And a lot of times the people who don't speak up for themselves, I had a colleague who was telling me that she was raised, not to snitch on people, and maybe. Hello, parents and caregivers. Join us every Wednesday for our Well Educated Wednesdays on Instagram Live from 5:30 to 6 o'clock. We will be getting your questions answered about how to get kids on track for learning and to stay on track for success. It's free, and you can ask any question that you would like. We're here to serve you and to make sure that you have the tools and strategies needed to make sure your kids are a success. And you can make sure that next generation is on a path to greatness. Maybe that's part of some of the hesitancy or whatever, but I tend not to do like the really formal complaints, like let me bring in the EEOC on you, let me bring in your supervisor, your supervisor, because I feel like most of the time I have a positive relationship with people, but again, you always have to just look yourself in the mirror and be like, no, if I'm going to be uncomfortable, you got to be uncomfortable too. Right? It's just not about me being uncomfortable. You got to be uncomfortable too. You have put me in a situation that is hard to handle, hard to deal with, that is affecting my family, that's affecting my health, that is affecting my peace. And so we got to talk about it. Just brushing it aside. And, I really look at numbers. Look at the numbers. Does it make sense? Do you have a huge number larger than somebody else of something? If you do, okay, that's inequity. And if it's not, explain why it's not. And if you don't have the words for it, it's probably because it is. Get that evidence together. I do investigations myself. I ask questions, find out information. And I see, okay, I've collected the evidence. Yes, I absolutely am overwhelmed and feeling stressed and feeling anxiety because I've absolutely been overloaded. And there's the facts. Fact number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. There it is. What do you have to say? Because I'm nice, because I'm friendly, because I'm talented, because I am good at something, you are going to treat me like a robot? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're not treating me like a robot. Mm-mm. And you know what? Like I said, I put on my Instagram post yesterday, for my ancestors, I am not going to suffer in silence. I am not going to have people, loading me up with extra work because somebody else is fragile. And that's what a lot of times it comes down to. You're strong, they're fragile, we're going to give you extra work. No, ma'am. No. In my case, I have some skills to help build capacity, but I'm not going to be anyone's robot. And you have to say that nicely. You have to say it professionally. You have to give them the statistics and the information to let them know it's not okay. And I definitely see a pattern, not just with myself, with other people. But I'm going to talk about myself first and point out all those ways. And then if I need to bring up other people, I will. If I need to report when nothing is done to support me, then I will. But I don't want to. That's not how I want to start. I just need, supervisors to know that sometimes the negative attitudes or whatever are more like just underground. Maybe they don't have a negative attitude, but they are, for whatever reason, treating people and supporting other people and like loading up other people. And they think it's okay. It's really not. But if you've had this issue, this is falling in love with learning, falling for learning, the Well-Educated Wednesdays. And to be well-educated is to be able to have the skills and capacity to speak up for yourself. And to know how to do it in a professional way, to know how to do it in a way that makes people pay attention, to gather the evidence and the information to show that this is actually happening, that this doesn't just happen for some people. And a lot of people like to say, oh, it's not because you're Black, or it's not because it's not on purpose. It doesn't matter if it's on purpose or not. If I accidentally cut off your toe, it doesn't matter if I did it on accident. The toe's still off of there. This harm is still done. So, what can be done to help support? How can we, stop the bleeding? How can we stop the harm? Because you've done something to harm someone, or the people that you have put in place have created a system which is inequitable, and you really need to pay attention to that. And that's something that sometimes supervisors don't really realize. Well, I'm not like that, but if you are having people in this place that are, and sometimes we don't check that stuff. We just support, like we get along with our colleagues, we trust people, and then we realize like when someone really speaks up, like, dang, yeah, you are treating someone unfairly. You are doing things that don't make any sense. And so, when someone is telling you something is untenable as a supervisor or a boss, you need to like pay attention. Like, is it really? Or is this person just complaining? I know like the first idea is like they're just complaining. But if you look, a lot of times they know exactly what they're talking about. And, the more that we're quiet, those of us who have this coming against us, right, being overloaded because of our excellence or whatever reason that they give lots of reasons. You have to think in terms of really thinking about, I got to be protected. If I burn out, who's going to pay my bills? If my health is gone, these people aren't going to pay. So you've got to really protect yourself. You're not going to pay anyone else's bills when they go sick and stuff. They can't pay you. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, you got to speak up for yourself. You got to really make sure that you are treated fairly. And when we're talking about interrupting systems, people really feel like stung by like an email or a letter that you send, but they really just need to look and reflect and really look at those numbers. Does that really make any sense that one person has this and another person has that? And you've kept piling on to someone where someone else who happens to be Caucasian or different persuasion or whatever, they don't have those same challenges. They don't have people constantly piling onto them. And does that make sense? And why not? Why'd you think that that was acceptable to do it to that person? Like, really think about why things are being done and really interrupt those systems, because they are in place. They're not on an accident. And again, even if people aren't doing it on purpose, because I've seen lots of people, because unfortunately they're operating in self-hatred. They're operating from a deficit mindset about themselves and the people that look like them. They will, unfortunately, sometimes be the people who are doing it, being the people who support other people doing that against people who look like them. And they will say, oh, it's not black people, it's just that black person. But it's like, no. When you look at, there's trends. This is this black person. And sometimes if you actually like do a self-reflection and see like, okay, am I doing this? And you'll find a lot of times you are. You're being softer on somebody. You're being nicer to someone because they are a fragile person that doesn't look like you. So you'll be meaner or ruder to someone who looks like you, who's stronger, who could take it, than someone who doesn't look like you, who you think is more fragile and not able to take it. And I have been guilty of this in the past, so I know. So, but I'm learning and growing. I'm falling for, I represent falling for learning, because yes, I am falling in love with learning constantly. And that is learning some lessons. And those lessons are not always easy to learn. Sometimes it's hard. It don't feel good all the time. But it is true and it's necessary. Again, I'm TD Flenaw. Thank you for joining us on our Well Educated Wednesdays. This was so important for you guys to hear and to know. And, I'm going to drink my tea. I'm going to do my self-care. I'm going to still be working on my book. I'm still going to be doing my podcast. I'm going to keep on keeping on despite people trying to pile on me. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. Sometimes when you are going for your goals and people think, oh, you're so amazing, whatever it is, they think they're, these backhanded compliments, whatever it is. Sometimes a pile on will stop you from